Welcome back to You Can't Make This Shit Up, certified true by election standards. I'm Kellen, that's David, and today we're talking about elections. Specifically, we are talking about election integrity and the dark side of that statement in more ways than one.
Oh boy, election integrity, election integrity. Okay,
Oh,
here we go. Analysis of Republican-led election integrity prosecutions reveals a low success rate and a disproportionate targeting of Democrats and minority voters. Surprise, surprise.
76%.
In 6 states, including Florida and Texas, there are only 47 convictions out of 136 prosecutions, with 76% of defendants being Black or Hispanic. Surprise,
What?
surprise, surprise. The investigations mostly focus on minor mistakes, undermining claims of widespread fraud. Critics argue that these efforts serve as a show to appease far right election denialists and justify new voting restrictions, potentially intimidating racial minorities from exercising their voting rights. You think this will scare the folks in the villages? Let's go, Kellen.
Oh, nothing can scare the folks in the villages. They're fearless. No fear STDs at all. But, anyways, this is, people always say, especially, minorities who vote Republican tend to get grumpy with the fact that the Democrats are considered and are the platform of choice for minority voters. And for the love of God, I wonder why. With legislation and actions like this, is on top of the fact that election integrity is better in the 21st century than it has in any of the other centuries in American history. We'll just throw it out there. I mentioned this last Friday. The fact our elections are being rigged, that they're being attacked, is by and large a myth. Like you mentioned, it is mostly very minor mistakes that land on procedural grounds, where they did the procedure wrong. It doesn't change the votes. No votes have been changed. It's just like, oh, a filing error. That's what it more boils down to. It's very, very mundane. Talk about 2020 specifically, which about a third of Americans still believe is rigged, just shy of a third. They've been able to improve. They haven't been able to prove 100 fake votes, let alone 3 million fake votes. It's so far-fetched, and it's fear-mongering.
Exactly, fear mongering to the point where Ron DeSantis created an elections integrity office department to hunt down election fraud in Florida. This is bullshit.
Poor Ron. He only won by 60%. He should have won by 100%.
And when you look at the numbers, I really want people to understand this. And in Ron DeSantis' most recent election, his victory for governor, you had an opponent who was weak, first of all. And then when you pour a third of a billion with a B, into the Florida elections, you're going to win big, especially against a party, the Florida Democrats, who are not well financed or well organized across the state. You better run up the numbers, period. You better show up with a supermajority in the legislature, period.
Mm-hmm.
So when conservatives and the media pundits talk about Ron DeSantis having this big victory and showing that even his own campaign, even out of his own mouth, that, oh yeah, look at what we did, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, it cost you a pretty penny. And where is it going to get you? A trip back to Florida after Iowa. But that was a tangent. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
There is no issue with our elections. We should have more involvement, and we don't by the voting public or the voting eligible public.
Yeah. Yeah, and I should go celebrate my victory against the baby I took a candy from. I owned them. They stood no chance. They lost easily to me. Stood no chance. But tangent aside, yes, what a lot of these prosecutions revolve around is minutia.
Mhm,
It's by and large, our election laws, our registration laws specifically,
mhm.
have a lot of arbitrary elements to it,
Okay,
if
all
that
right.
makes
Talk to me.
sense. Because
Talk to me.
most countries who use voting as a primary means of governance, power coming up from the people, nobody has to register to vote. Most of the time, you don't need to register in these countries. Why? Because you're old enough. If you're old enough to vote, you're old enough to vote, you vote. Nowadays, we have electronic trackers. These days we can track your votes electronically, so you're not going
Mhm.
to vote twice.
Right,
And that's the benefit of it. Now, because it's harder to create fake votes than it ever has been.
right.
And and yeah, it's probably the most blatant case of misinformation in American politics. Usually, when people talk about misinformation, it's a minor misunderstanding about something. No, I see it so often. I know people in my community that say so often about all these hundreds of thousands of dead people voting. There were never hundreds of thousands of dead people voting. There has never been a shred of evidence. Donald Trump's lawyer, Lena Haba, got fined $500,000 because she filed multiple lawsuits where she left the evidence section blank. For
Wow.
Christ's sakes, people.
You
Like,
can't make this shit up.
you're going to make a lawsuit and not even give evidence? You're going to create these prosecutions? You're not even going to give evidence? And yet you still say you're right? No. The burden of proof is on them. The burden of proof is on those who accuse election fraud. But they're taking the Joseph McCarthy argument of, well, you're going to have to prove it's false first.
Right.
No, it is up to them to prove that it is real, and they have failed to do it almost every single time.
And this is a type of voter suppression, sowing the seeds of fear into potential voters, or sowing the seeds of uncertainty into voters. I listen to Washington Journal and C-SPAN often, and I like listening to the American people who call in
Oh yeah.
to give their opinion about one issue or another, and to listen to the uncertainty and the fear that some of these voters or callers, let's call them callers, chime in into the show with, is disheartening. And it's this campaign of sorts, this whisper campaign, as I will call it, is not necessarily a whisper, but this protracted campaign by um, election deniers, uh, MAGA supporters of Donald J. Trump, that leaves in the minds of even people who I would think are pretty solid in their position as voters to exercise their right to vote, to say to themselves out loud to the public, well, it doesn't matter. My vote doesn't matter. And I'm afraid that we'll see more and more of that. We already have low turnout, especially at the very local level. But things like this,
Yeah.
these prosecutions, the creation of election integrity departments or offices, it's just straight garbage.
Yeah. I tend to challenge the low turnout thing a little bit because most countries don't have as good a turnout as we, even democratic countries who make it super easy. it is America's population. A lot of like over half America's population is engaged, and I think by and large that's good. There's always more to go, always more way to go, but I think we're not doing too bad in that sense. And I think the common argument I see for stuff like this is, well, it can't hurt to make sure that you can't be too safe. And I don't think that ends up being true because because think about this right now. It takes days, weeks to get election results. Why? Because our system moves too slow. There's a lot of these working positions are understaffed. You have people like Rudy Giuliani who now are going bankrupt because he won't stop going after election workers. In the worry that I have is that now those election workers are going to be scared. I think that's the most likely group that's going to be affected by stuff like this.
Right.
Why should I work in an election system? Why should I work in an election system where I make one mistake? Perhaps it doesn't even matter. And some Republican is going to come out here and try to throw me in jail for it. It's like, oh, no. He capitalized the middle word of a sentence. Oh my God, stop him. That's unconstitutional. It says in the rules you have to put lowercase letters. No, and that's the worry. I'm not super worried that people are going to be scared to vote. I'm worried that people are going to be scared to work on the election. And I'm also worried
That's a good point.
that this whisper campaign you're talking about is undermining people's trust in a very, very robust, very well put in most ways, a very well put together system of voting. It took decades, centuries. We've been honing the election system. Is it flawed? Yes, we have gerrymandering. Is it flawed? Yes, we have plurality voting instead of any other type of voting. That's what we get for being ahead of the game. We get an old-fashioned theory. That's what we get. But we have a very robust security. We really do. And if there's one thing to be proud of in America, it's our peaceful transfer of power. It's the fact that, we get to elect who we want, and that it works. It's not perfect, but it works.
Right.
And now this campaign saying that essentially that democracy doesn't work is disheartening. And this idea that it's rigged unless proven otherwise not only is that just a complete fallacy, the burden of proof fallacy. If you're making an accusation, you have to prove it. The defense does not have to prove it.
Right.
It's just instilling fear, and that fear makes real harm. People are going to believe that their voices aren't being heard, even if their voice, one in hundreds of millions, has been heard. Their voice has been factored in. It's just there's so many people. People are not convinced their voice doesn't matter, that their vote doesn't matter, that they can't trust their government, that they can't trust their officials, that there are workers behind the scenes trying to screw them over, even though their workers are just trying to do their job, and now they're trying to not go to jail while doing it. It's going to weather. It's a weather. If there's one thing we cannot do as a democratic system of government, it's attack voting. We can't. It's the number one way we can fail, to stop people from voting, telling people that they shouldn't vote, telling people that they can't vote. And of course, going after the workers. If we can't maintain our elections, that's a surefire way for us to fail. It's a surefire way for a government to lose legitimacy. It's a surefire way to ruin all that our country is built if we can't trust our own elections and we refuse to and we attack them. That's just the way I see it.
And unfortunately, I believe we are steadily moving in that direction. And that's not good for our democracy, our representative democracy.
Yeah.
Democracy.
It is a real shame. And here's what I kind of do, because I know a lot of election deniers, more than I care to say, but I just say, it's like, oh, can you link me a report about these hundreds of thousands of missing dead people? I didn't know. The joke is they can't because they don't exist.
Right.
I just asked them, oh, can you show me? I'm not try not to even be antagonizing about just my practical advice for people in the know out there. Just like ask it casually. Oh, well, can you send me something about it? Chances are they can't. And if they do, it's like Alex Jones. You say, so you trust it. So it's like, so does this guy actually have any evidence linked? No. Chances are they don't. Most of the time, they just have nothing to say, ultimately. And I think that's the important thing to emphasize. Like, can you walk me through it? And then they say, they try, but maybe they can't. You say, well, I'm not saying. And then you can come out with the, I'm not convinced.
Right.
That's just my personal experience. It's not perfect. People are stubborn and people are overly attached to their candidates and can't accept losses. Gosh, this generation is so soft. You lose, just accept it. It's really bad on the Republican side right now, but it is also important to remember that to a lesser extent, this is a problem with Democrats too. I am glad that Charlie Christian Company didn't try to claim that the election was rigged, because that would, if the shoe was on the other foot, I feel like that might have happened.
With the ass whipping that he took, it's hard to claim any type of election interference.
Yeah, that would be some goddamn impressive criminality. Like, I'd be so impressed I'd let him win. But anyways, I think you should vote for that like button, that subscribe button, and share. We're trying to grow our community at all turns. We love comments. We love creating conversations. And if you completely disagree with us, you have concerns, let us know. We like seeking feedback from people who don't share the same views as us. It's the best way to grow. It's the best way to, I guess, not necessarily moderate your views, but to add sophistication to them. It's the best thing that we can all do for each other. With that,
I agree.
have a wonderful day, everybody, and we are